Welcome back to my channel, y'all. This is episode 7 review slash recap of Black Lightning. My name is Tierney, so let's jump right into it. This episode starts off with Anissa. She's getting a checkup from her mom, and she says all that talk about Dr. King and nonviolence and dad is Black Lightning, like that's crazy. Lynn tells Anissa that she needs to stop this right now. It will destroy her life. Anissa says, you and dad taught me to help people, and that's what I'm doing. I'm helping people. Lynn says, we told you to help people by becoming a social activist or a doctor or something like that, not a superpowered vigilante, as she puts it. Anissa says, so I'm just supposed to sit back and watch the 100 destroy Freeland? You know, I finally have the chance to do something, and I'm going to do it. Lynn says, I understand what you're going through right now, but this road you're on only leads to heartache and pain. Anissa asks her bluntly, do you have powers? Can you stop a bullet? And then she says, how could you possibly know what I'm going through? I believe Anissa is feeling some type of way because her mom is telling her, like, you don't need to use these powers, and her dad uses the powers, so she's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? Then we see a scene with Gambi and Jefferson, and Gambi tells him that he did some digging on the dark web, and it was probably a bunch of high-end tech thieves that pull a job, move on to the next city. They use the equipment and they sell it to the highest bidder, and they've stolen over $10 million worth of stuff. Gambi says, don't beat yourself up about the Anissa thing. There's no way you could have known that she had powers. He tells Jefferson, I'll look after Lynn. You go home, get some rest, check on Jennifer. And then Jefferson says that Jennifer is at Keisha's. Thanks for your concern. But, he says it sarcastically. Gambi says, have I done something to upset you? And Jefferson says, it's what you didn't do that upset me, Gambi. And that was real dramatic. But he's absolutely right. He asks Gambi again, why didn't you tell me that Tobias was back in Freeland? Gambi says, we're back to this again, and Jefferson says, yes, we are. He also says, do you expect me to believe that it only took you 2 hours to find out about some high-end tech thieves on the dark web, but a 6-foot albino man that should have been dead shows back up and you couldn't tell me that information? Gambi says, I told you I didn't know. And Jefferson says, I know what you told me. That doesn't mean that I believe you. Gambi says, I didn't tell you to protect you. And Jefferson says, from Tobias? And then Gambi says, from yourself. And so I roll at that point because we already know that Gambi knows Lady E. We don't know the extent of their relationship, but they have history. They spoke like they've talked numerous times. So he's obviously on the wrong side of things, or he's in the middle of things. I don't know where he is, but at this point I feel like he's an enemy. Then Gambi says, I didn't want you to do something that you regret for the rest of your life, and to trust me on this. And then Jefferson says, you know what, I don't trust you anymore. We see Tobias. He's getting ready to fight somebody. He's dressed in a martial arts uniform, I believe, all black, and fighting a man, and he beats him really fast. So Joey tells him that this guy was the best of the best. He's seen him tussle himself, and the guy gets back up, and then he quickly defeats him again. And then he tells Joey to check his bag. He must be hyped up on something, so they check his bag and they find green light. They say it like they have nothing to do with it, which was surprising to me because I'm thinking the whole time that they were behind green light. But I could be wrong. I don't know. Then we see Lynn and Jefferson. They're at the police station and they're getting a sketch done of the men that broke into her lab. And Henderson comes and sits down and he asks, a couple questions to Lynn. Like, does she have any enemies, an ex-boyfriend? Did she cut somebody off in traffic? Anybody who would find a reason to break into her lab or hold her hostage. And she answers no to all those questions. And then there was one question that he asked. He asked her, was she seeing anybody new? And Jefferson was kind of caught off guard with that question, like, oh, is she? But she said no, of course. Then he looks at Jefferson like, well, Jefferson, what's up with you? And he says, well, me? What about me? There's nothing up. He says, do you think the 100 are targeting you for any reason? And Jefferson says, I don't do anything. I'm nobody. And Henderson says, you're not nobody. You give your students at Garfield High hope, and those are the students that the 100 can't use. He says, just be aware and watch your back. The man finishes the sketch and Lynn says, yes, these are the pictures of the men who broke into my lab. Then we go to a scene of Lady E, and she holds up a sketch of two men, And she says this needs to be handled with a delicate touch, and she gives the sketches of the two men to two other men, I guess, to handle them or take care of them. I'm not really sure. She texts Gambi and says the cleaners are on their way, whatever that means. I assume that these men are going to get the men that broke into Lynn's lab. Then we see Jefferson and Lynn, and they're walking out of the station. They're kind of in the hallway. He asks Lynn, well, what if somebody found out I was Black Lightning and they abducted you to get to me? She says if they had known that, why didn't they take me when they had the opportunity? And he says, I don't know. And then he asks her, did anything unusual happen at the time of the break-in? And she says, well, there was one thing. Anissa came by with some of Alvin's research. And he says, Alvin, my father? And she says, yeah. I was looking at it, but I didn't get an opportunity to go into detail with it because the break-in happened. Jefferson asks her, where did she get his research? And Lynn says she was coming to the lab to talk about it right before the break-in happened. Do you think it's just a coincidence? He says, I don't know. You know, at this point, they can't rule anything out. We see a scene of Tobias, and he's talking to his sister about green light, and he says, honestly, it's killing too many people. It's too volatile. It's too addictive, and dead customers don't pay. And he calls his assistant Cyanide, that's her name, and he tells her to reach out to Lady E's people and set up a meeting. And then his sister says, you're going to set up a meeting to talk to her? And he says, talk? No. So I assume that he's going to set up an ambush on her. I don't know. So then Jefferson says, maybe what happened to you isn't my fault, but what happened to Anissa is my fault. And Lynn says, there's no way that you could have known she had powers. And me, on the other hand, you know, I should have had an idea or a clue or a hint that she had powers because I work with mapping and genes and stuff like that. She says that we need to get Anissa to meet them at the hospital so that she can run some tests so that they know what they're dealing with. And Jefferson says, no, the only place that we're going is back to Gambi's. Don't you remember that your lab just got broken into and you were held hostage? And she says, how could I forget? Well, she asks him, what are we supposed to do with her in the meantime? And he tells her, well, we'll just have to explain to her that her powers shouldn't be used. They cause more trouble than they solve problems. And we would just have to protect her from herself. And then Lynn mentions that Jennifer might manifest powers as well. And Jefferson says, Jennifer's too much to handle on her own. So basically we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Lynn says, you know, we have to test her too, and I'm just scared for my girls. And Jefferson says, you know, I know. Back at the high school, Jefferson is dealing with a disciplinary problem. A teacher is disciplining a student and telling him, you know, you need to control your anger. And he gets a phone call from Henderson, and Henderson asks him, is there anyone else like you in Freeland? And Jefferson says, well, he doesn't say anything, he just kind of laughs. Henderson says, not exactly like you, but someone with unique abilities. And Black Lightning says, well, why do you ask? And he says, well, I got a report stating that a woman destroyed a Confederate statue with a stomp. And no matter how much I agree with what she did, you cannot go around destroying university property or any property. Black Lightning says, I haven't heard of anything, but if I do, I'll let you know. And then Black Lightning says, since I'm looking out for you, can you do a favor for me? And Henderson says, a favor like what? Black Lightning says the clue that he gave him to track down Toledo didn't pan out. Is there another way that he can track him down? He says, why are you so hung up on Toledo anyway? He's a hired gun. Black Lightning says that he's after Toledo's boss, Tobias Whale. And then Henderson laughs and says, you chasing ghosts now? Black Lightning says, I saw Tobias. I know he's still around. The only thing is he looks like he hasn't aged a day in 30 years. Henderson says, how is that possible? And Black Lightning says, I don't know. I'll let you know when I catch him. Anissa knocks on the door to his office. She starts rambling off ideas about how they can go to the community center and these green light houses and shut all this stuff down. And he tells her, you know, you're a med student and you're a teacher right now. That's all you need to be. Just because you have powers doesn't mean that you have to use them. She says, I've already used my powers. And he says, I know, to destroy a Confederate statue. And she's like, oh, well, you know, I lost my head. I'm sorry about that. He says, you know, that's just it. You don't have the opportunity in this field to lose your head. And she's like, well, train me then. Show me, what you know. He says, no, you're clearly not ready. And then she says, no, Dad, you're not ready. She's about to leave when he asks her about the box that she gave to her mother with his dad's research in it. She says, when I got my powers, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to turn to. So I started Googling on the internet, and I saw that Grandpa was into that kind of research as well. I went to the Freeland Gazette. I talked to his editor, David Poe, and I got some of his old articles. Jefferson says it was selfish of you to give that box to your mother without telling her all the details. Then Anissa says, do you think the box was the reason for the break-in? He says, I don't know, but in the meantime, you need to warn David Poe. And he says, just you, no powers. The next thing we see is Gambi going to talk to Lady Eve again. He goes to talk to her, and she says, the Dr. Stewart situation is being cleaned up as we speak. He says, I'm not here about Lynn, I'm here about Tobias. And she's like, what about him? He's a retail outlet. And Gambi says, he's a wanted man, his head is too big. I've been keeping tabs on him ever since he came to my shop, and whatever message you think you sent, you didn't send because he's about to open a nightclub. Gambi says it's only a matter of time before he's caught by the cops, or even worse, Black Lightning. He could destroy the whole ecosystem that we've built over the years. So this whole situation that they have going on goes back to a long time ago, and I officially am not a fan of Gambi. I wasn't before, but it's official now. He's cut. I don't like him. Lady Eve tells him that she's aware that Tobias has been stepping over boundaries lately. She says to cut him out of that ecosystem would throw the balance off. But then she says, you can have Joey Toledo. That's his right-hand man. So then she gives him a box, and she says, give Mr. Toledo my regards. Jennifer, Anissa, and Jefferson are all in the kitchen. They're eating breakfast, and it's really quiet. And Jennifer says, what's going on? On a normal day, you would notice that I had on your favorite shirt, and Dad would ask me, did I have an activity to replace track yet? But nobody said anything. He says, you know what? Anissa was mad at me because I blew off a scan that your mother wanted to do. I was too busy at the time, but now I have time to do the scan. And Jennifer's like, okay, so that's all this is about, is the scan? And they're like, yeah. Anissa excuses herself, and then Jefferson's like, well, I'll do the scan when your mother comes back. She had to leave suddenly on a conference. So that's the end of that scene. And that's really all we see of Jennifer this whole episode. The next thing we see is Anissa. She's leaving a message for David Poe, and she's telling him, she hopes everything's okay. And she tells him to give her a call when he can. At the time, she's at Gambi's shop, and she's dropping off some stuff for her mother. And she comes to apologize to her mother and tell her, I didn't like the way our conversation ended, and I want to apologize to you. And Lynn says, I understand, I just wanted you to have a normal life, but doing this, you're not going to be able to have that. When was the last time you had a conversation with somebody outside of your family? And Anissa basically tells her, I'm willing to sacrifice my happiness so that other people can have theirs. After that, she goes to the Freeland Gazette, maybe thinking that David Poe is dodging her call or something. And she knocks on his door, and then she looks in his office, and she sees that it's kind of empty and put together. Somebody walks by, and they ask her, can I help you? And she says, actually, you can. Is David Poe around today? The lady tells her that David Poe passed away a couple of days ago. He was killed in a hit-and-run accident on his morning bike ride. And she kind of looks shocked, like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what he said was going to happen. So now she knows that it's serious. I don't know if she knew that before, but this is proof. Then we see Gambi. He's dressed in all black, and he's going to this club. It looks like a fight club where they hold sporting events, like that cage fighting stuff. You see Toledo's men are guarding the office, and Toledo is inside the office. He's counting cash. He hears a disturbance. He tells one of the men to go out and see what it is, and they don't come back. Well, they do come back, but I think Gambi throws them back in the office. Then he throws in like a small bomb. It blows up. This is when Toledo stands up and he starts shooting, and Gambi comes in and he's like, well, who are you? Gambi doesn't say anything. He just shoots him, and then he leaves the box on top of Toledo's chest. So I guess Gambi's out here just killing people now. Like, I don't know what's going on. Gambi is not who I thought he was. It's just all messed up. Like, this is crazy. Anissa comes home to tell Jefferson that David Poe was killed. Then Lynn calls Jefferson to Gamby's, and he says, I came over as soon as you called. And she's sitting there, I think she's drinking some wine. Lynn asks Jefferson, do you remember when Anissa started walking? And then she says all that to say that you have to train her, because if you don't, she's going to keep going back out without you anyway. So the best thing to do is to protect her. Gamby walks in and says, I would have got more food if I had known you were coming. And he gets a phone call, and they all look at him like, who's the phone call from? But he says it's nothing, and then he walks out. We see Tobias. He's in his office listening to jazz when his sister Tori walks in looking all sad. And he's like, what is it? And she tells him that Joey Toledo is dead. And she hands him the box, and she says that one of your men found this on top of his body. He opens the box, and it's dust inside. And he's like, well, Lady Eve wants me to go hide. Tori says, don't you get it? It's either you or her. He says if he killed Lady Eve without the Shadow Board's approval, it would be like he would be burying himself with her. Now, who is the Shadow Board is my question. I might have to actually read the comic, but anyway, there's some board out there called the Shadow Board, and apparently they have the final say on things. We see Henderson at the scene where Joey Toledo got killed. He gets a call from Black Lightning to meet him on the rooftop of another building. He goes up to the roof, and he tells Black Lightning that Joey Toledo suffocated on his own blood, I believe. Black Lightning says that Joey Toledo was my only lead to Tobias, and then Henderson says maybe not, because I got some tickets from Joey Toledo's girlfriend outside of a club that's being remodeled, and the grand opening is tomorrow. Henderson says if Tobias is back, that's where he'll be. Then we get a scene of Lynn. She's looking at the news. She's still at Gamby's place, and she sees that the two men that were involved in the break-in from her lab got caught, and they were talking about the whole dark web thing that Gamby was talking about in the beginning of the episode. And Gamby walks in, and he says, oh, you saw the news? And she says, I guess you were right. And, we haven't seen eye to eye, but I do believe that you want to protect Jefferson and you want to protect our family, and I want to ask you a favor. Then we see Black Lightning. He's on top of a roof, and he's going back to that flashback of his father and Tobias torturing his father. And I assume he's waiting for Tobias's car, and he is at the grand opening of the club. Then we see Gamby. He is designing a suit for Anissa, and Lynn says, I hope that you're designing a suit and not a coffin for my baby. He goes up to talk to her, and he brings the notes with her, the ones that he's sketching for her suit, and he gives them to her, and she looks down, and she's like, oh, you're designing me a suit? And she's excited, and he says, yeah, it's going to be top of the line, state of the art, water resistant, all that good stuff. Just give me some time to get it together. And she's like, okay. Then her mom comes up. Lynn says she gets it. You've always been protective of others. They tell each other that they love each other, and then Anissa says, I'm going to take you home. The rest of the episode is kind of confusing to me. We're getting into the fight scene, and they coincided with Lady E at her funeral parlor. But the first thing we see is Black Lightning. He's on top of the roof. He's waiting for Tobias to get there. We see Tobias. He's getting out the car, and I think Tori asks him, do you have everything you need? And he says, with you by my side, I do have everything, or something like that, something to that effect. He's in a dark hallway. He sees Black Lightning. He's like, oh my gosh, or something. He says something like that, and Black Lightning strikes him. And then a fight ensues between Black Lightning and the rest of Tobias's men. He mistakenly blasts Tori, who was in the line of fire right in front of Tobias. Obviously, he meant to get Tobias, but he got Tori. His men grab him and take him outside, put him in the car, and he sees that Tori is hurt, but they don't even let him get a chance to take her with them. They just leave her in the hallway. Black Lightning comes up to Tori, and he's telling her, please breathe, don't die on me. And she looks at him. I think she sees who he is, and then she lets go. So I guess that's the end of Tori. I'm not really sure. Then I'm going to go over to Lady E. She's at the funeral parlor. She's walking down a set of stairs, and men start coming out to attack. She grabs one of her guards and uses them as a guard or a shield in front of her. so that she's not getting hurt. Now they're using electric guns and they're also using regular guns. I'm not sure if her people had the regular guns or the electric guns, but they're shooting back and forth. Towards the end of the fight, she uses one of her guards as a shield, basically getting him killed. She gets close enough to a guy with an electric gun and she's able to knock him out to the point where she has the gun. So she's looking around to make sure everybody's pretty much dead. I think she had to shoot one more person. She's looking around thinking that everybody's either dead or they're wounded. What she doesn't see is this man with an electric gun climbs out of a coffin and shoots her as she turns around. It's not funny, but the look on her face was crazy. Like, she just didn't see that coming. I don't think anybody would. I mean, he climbed out of a coffin, obviously. So Lady E is dead. I'm not really sure. I don't know. The next scene we see is Jefferson. He's back home on his porch. He's sitting there. It looks like he's drinking a beer, and he looks disappointed in himself, obviously because he killed Tori, and he didn't mean for anybody else to get hurt besides Tobias. We see Anissa. She's on the phone in her bed, and she calls Grace, and she leaves a message for Grace asking her, you know, can we go out to dinner sometime or let's catch up. Jefferson comes inside Anissa's room, or he asks her, can he come in? And then he's like, well, I want to talk to you for a moment. And he tells her that I'm a hypocrite. I lost my head today and a young lady got killed for no reason. And he says that we're going to make mistakes, but I'm going to teach you everything I know. I'm not perfect, but we're going to try to, you know, help the city of Freeland. Anissa says, you know, you're not a hypocrite. You're a great dad. You're the best superhero. And I can only hope to live up to your example. And he says, no, I want you to be better than me. And that scene right there, that was touching, y'all. Like, a dad saying that he wants his daughter to be better than him, or a son, you know, if he had a son. I just love this show. So then he gets a call on his cell phone from Henderson, and of course he has to not pretend, but he has to put on his Black Lightning voice. He says hello, and Henderson says, you went too far this time. But he's looking at Lady E, so I'm confused. Did they take Tori's body? Did they find Tori's body? He was looking at Lady E thinking that Black Lightning took out Lady E, but Black Lightning wasn't even at the funeral parlor, so they kind of have it mixed up. We know what happened. I'm sure all the rights will be wrong, but right now it looks like Jefferson murdered an innocent person. See the lady on the news, and she's reporting that Lady E was murdered along with 2 of her employees that night, and electrocution was the cause of death. So Black Lightning is the prime suspect. And then she says Freeland's protector just became his biggest threat. Then randomly, while they're showing us this news clip, we see Lala on the bed, and he wakes up, takes a huge gasp of air, and he looks around and he's like where is he? And then we see LaWanda, and she asks him, Latavius, do you believe in the resurrection? And before he can answer, she becomes a swirl, and she ends up right here on his chest as a tattoo. And I'm looking like, what in the world? Like, this man then came back from the dead. This is crazy. So yeah, I'm sure all will be explained. Amanda Davis was the person who played the news anchor. She passed away last year, and I believe she passed away suddenly of a massive stroke. And so they dedicated this episode to her because it was probably her last episode. I believe she was only 62 years old. So, you know, a loving memory of her. And I heard that she was a big time anchor in Atlanta. I also wanted to go ahead and give a couple of shout outs to some channels that you guys should definitely check out and have shown me a lot of support. The first one being My Twisted Life with Poetry, or As Poetry. I always get this wrong, but My Twisted Life with Poetry. And I told her about the show Black Lightning. She started reviewing it. I love her reviews. Y'all please check them out. She does a lot of other videos as well. You know, her random rides to work, her poetry, news and twisted views, as well as fitness videos as well. And then also check out this channel. Her name is Ty Bivens, and she does different kind of content on her channel as far as fitness, and her live streams on Sundays. She live streams for about 3 hours at a time sometimes, and she just sits and talks to her viewers. She tries to support everybody that watches her. And then also my other friend on YouTube, Lala Mosley, please check out her channel. She does beauty videos, nail tutorials, and you know, other content as well, hair tutorials. And then the last channel that I wanted to mention is Ritzy_ENT, and it's a gaming channel, and he does a lot of live streams and games with people, and you know, it's very interactive with people, talking to them while he's gaming and stuff. So y'all please check out these channels. They support my channel, and they'll show your channel some support too. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this review slash recap, and thank y'all for sticking with me on this channel. I appreciate you. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.